Okay, so let's get started. So last time we were talking about differences between the ascending and descending pathways. So remember, in the nervous system, the pathways are like if they were highway roads where you have information going in one direction, or well, vehicles going in one direction, and then vehicles going in the opposite direction. So ascending means going up. So in this case, for these ascending pathways, we have up to 3 neurons. And depending on where they are located is how you call them. So in this case, the neurons that goes from peripheral effectors, in this case, let's say it's the toes or the fingers, and then they go into the spinal cord, the axons of these neurons. So you will have your first order neuron, the one that, again, connects the effectors, the ones that receive the sensory information, to the spinal cord. And then typically you can have pathways that goes on the same side of the body, which is called ipsilateral. And then some of them, they can cross to the other side, and that provides contralateral information. So now, in this case, these two neurons, the first order neurons, they go at least in the spinal cord ipsilaterally. So here we have some tracks like the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. And then these ones connect here with the second neuron in the medulla oblongata. And then these neurons, which are the second order neurons, will cross here to the other side. So then the information from the right side will go to the left, and the information from the left will go to the right. And then these second order neurons can either stop here in the thalamus, or they can send the information to the cerebral cortex. And then if you have a neuron that sends an information to this cerebral cortex with this other neuron, this will be the third order neuron. So if you recall from last time, the thalamus, it is an area of the brain that helps to filter the information. So not everything is supposed to go into the cerebral cortex so that we will be aware. But part of this sensory information then can bring, let's say that you touch an object, it's hot, then you have to withdraw your hand. In that case, yes, that information goes into the cerebral cortex. Others, they just stay there, and then it can go into centers nearby where you can have automatic reflexes without the brain being aware. And then for the descending pathways. So descending pathways start in the cerebrum. In this case, will be in the cerebral cortex. And you have multipolar neurons that extends long axons that migrate here between these basal nuclei, and then go down and connect into the opposite side of the body in the medulla oblongata. So this migration of these axons happens through this little structure that's called the internal capsule. And this pathway that starts in the cortex will start with the name, cortical, for the cortex. And then it goes to the spinal cord, that's why it's called corticospinal. But again, you have a crossing of the axon from the left side that goes now into the right, and then from the right into the left. And this neuron is called the upper motor neuron, or UMN. And then once it crosses, it migrates down in the spinal cord ipsilaterally, and then it will exit at the level of whatever muscle you want to move. So this will be a pathway that it is motor, descending, going down, and then it's voluntary in this case. And then you have an interneuron that is going to connect into this lower motor neuron that is going to send information from the spinal cord into the effector. So this is the corticospinal pathway. So now the next part will be integrating this information, because you already receive a stimuli, you send it either through an ascending pathway, or you send a command through your descending pathway to muscles. And not necessarily has to be skeletal muscles. Remember, we also have the heart and also digestive viscerae that needs to contract with their muscles. But for the sensory motor integration, so basically, again, you have a receptor that receives a particular stimuli, and then that signal will travel through these axons in the peripheral nerve, and these axons are going to bring an afferent signal into your spinal cord. And then it enters into the spinal cord in the posterior region, in the posterior horns, and then you will have your first order neuron synapsing another secondary neuron in the spinal cord that is going to be the second order neuron. And then the second order neuron bring that information into the thalamus, but also into the brainstem, depending on what is the level of that second order neuron, where it's going to reach. And then your third order neuron will reach the cortex, and then you will make sense about what stimuli you are receiving. So it can be visual stimuli, it can be tactile stimuli, if a surface is rough, if it's smooth, temperature-wise, if it's cold an object, if it's hot. So all that sensory information goes into your cerebral cortex, and then you generate a response. And then your motor response will start in the case of voluntary movement in the prefrontal cortex, just ahead. It's in the frontal lobe, ahead of the primary motor cortex, which is in the precentral gyrus. So you start thinking about what movement you're going to perform, and then you send that signal into the primary motor cortex, and then you start sending that information from that upper motor neuron into the lower motor neuron, and then that lower motor neuron will connect into a muscle, and that is the efferent signal, or exiting, which is motor, or it can be into a gland. So you can have voluntary or reflexive responses, because, I mean, again, not only the somatic system, which is basically a voluntary system, will control voluntary muscles, but we also have the heart again, and the digestive viscerae, or other organs, hollow organs that has a smooth muscle. So here is all the entire cycle. Sensory receptor receive the stimuli, you generate action potentials that travel through this first order neuron, and then enters into the posterior region of the spinal cord. Then you have a second order neuron that brings this information to thalamus, brainstem. If you need to be aware of that, you put it into the cerebral cortex, whatever region you need to have that information going to. And then you send information into this upper motor neuron with some interneurons. And then you start that descending pathway. So everything that goes up is ascending, and then everything that goes down is descending. So your upper motor neuron connects into the spinal cord and then into your effector. So sensory, motor. Sensory goes up, motor goes down. Questions? Okay, so functionally speaking, you already heard this before. Primary cortex, primary motor cortex, plans and executes voluntary movement. And then we have the sensory cortices. Cortex is singular, cortices is plural. So they receive the information from different areas of the body, and then you process that information. And then we have within the surface of the brain, or well, within the brain, not precisely the surface, but we have association areas. So these association areas, it helps for the connection between the sensory and the motor, so that you can process the information from multiple regions. So you can modulate a response if it's needed to be modulated. And here is the specific location of key primary cortical areas. Primary motor cortex in the precentral gyrus of the frontal lobe. And here is what it does. It does so together with the prefrontal area. I keep saying prefrontal area, plan and executes, but this one is more the primary motor cortex execution of sending commands rather than planning. And then S1, or primary somatosensory cortex, it's located posterior to this region. Remember, these two regions are subdivided by the central sulcus. So this one is anterior to the central sulcus, this one is posterior to the central sulcus. It's located in the parietal lobe and processes sensations like touch, pressure, vibration, and the ability to sense the position of the different parts of the body, which is known as proprioception. Primary visual cortex is located in the occipital lobe, in the lower part of the occipital lobe. It interprets visual stimuli that comes from the back of our eyes, where we have photoreceptors, which is called the retina. And then the auditory cortex, we have it in the temporal lobe. So it is located specifically in the transverse temporal gyri and help us to detect volume and pitch of sounds. Premotor cortex. So it is located anterior to the primary motor cortex, plans and coordinates complex body movements. S2, somatosensory association area, it is just located posteriorly to this primary somatosensory area in the parietal lobe. This one helps for us to understand or comprehend perception of touch and spatial relationships. Visual cortex association area, it is also located in the occipital lobe, a little bit anterior to the primary visual area. And then this one helps us to recognize objects and faces. And then just as the other two, where we have secondary areas in the audition sense, we also have a secondary area, an auditory association cortex. So this one is also located in the temporal lobe. It's adjacent to this primary auditory area, and it helps to interpret sounds, language, and auditory memory. So, do you think I'm angry? Why not?
Because you're smiling.
But the tone of voice, right? I mean, you can be blind, or you might be talking to someone on the phone, and just based on audition, you can tell whether the person is angry or not. So you can tell a lot by the voice of a person, guys, as well. So then that is part of what our auditory association area does. So rather than just, okay, well, I hear this, what does this mean? That's what they do. And then internally to the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe and the frontal, we have the insula, which is a gustatory cortex area, and then it processes taste information. So this one, together with the limbic system, also, I mean, it helps to create memory, olfaction as well. The olfactory cortex, we have it medial in the temporal lobe, and it's part of the limbic system. It processes smell stimuli. And then we have some areas that are helpful for multitasking. The anterior frontal lobe, it helps to plan, make decisions. It is in charge partly of our personality, social behavior, and complex cognitive functions, like doing math, for instance. And then parietal association cortex. So this one, it is located just next to this association cortex, which is also known as general interpretative area. This one helps us to be aware of the space, and also to pay attention, and well, I told you, right, knowing also as well the position of her body in space. Temporal. So the association cortex. So this one is located widespread in the temporal lobe. It helps us to recognize complex stimuli, including knowing faces, how objects look like, and create associations, memory associations. And then for language, we have two areas. We have Broca's, which is located in the inferior lateral part of our frontal lobe. This one is located typically in the left hemisphere and controls the movement of the muscles of mastication, so that when we speak, we produce clear speech by articulating well the words. So when someone has a stroke or damage to this area, the person knows what he wants to say, but the words doesn't come right. It's like a slur speech that the person will have. So in this case, the patients understand language but struggle to form complete sentences. And typically, again, we have lateralization for language, and is found on the left side of our brain. Wernicke's, another area for language. So this one, it is located superior and lateral to the temporal lobe. It's just as Broca's, located in the left hemisphere. And this one helps us to understand language. So, if someone has damage to this Wernicke's area, the person would have something that's called Wernicke's aphasia. So, the person can articulate well the words, but it doesn't make sense. And he's not your anatomy professor. can be like regular language, guys. So, for instance, the person can switch the order of the words that we normally know, like how they're supposed to be. And then this is known as producing a word salad. As well, the person will have trouble understanding language. So the person will be able to make sense of individual words, but not when they are combined in a sentence. So you can say to the person, for instance, cat, and then the person is going to start thinking about the image of a cat. But if you put the cat is white, the cat is black, a person will be not understanding. That's where Nikki's. And then again, this is found on the left side. Sometimes acronyms make sense, but for many of us, but depending on your context, it can change. For instance, RBC, what it means for someone who is in anatomy and physiology. Well, it will be red blood cell. Okay, so you make sense of that. And then RBC for other ones means Regional Branch Committee. Now that's different. So it depends on your context, but in the case of someone with Wernicke's, they cannot make sense even that you provide the context. So here is a topographic view of the surface of the brain with the different regions that we considered before. So again, just general names of the lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. And then internally here, we will have the insula, but you just have to separate these lobes. So here we have Broca's area. And then here we have primary motor cortex. And then this is the central sulcus, primary somatosensory cortex. And then anterior to this, to the primary motor cortex, we have the premotor cortex. And then here we have the frontal eye field. And then here we have Wernicke's. And then we're looking for the left hemisphere. And then here we have auditory association area, primary auditory cortex here, primary visual cortex here, and then here we have the visual association area. And then here we have parietal association cortex, or what we call the general interpretative area. And then here we have the somatosensory association cortex. So everything in red here will be the primary motor cortex. Sensory will be here in blue. And then association areas in orange. And then multiple task will be the rest of the brain. So within primary motor and then primary somatosensory areas, we have also a topographical map that tells you that we have a specific number of neurons dedicated to either move the muscles or to feel sensation with these areas of the body. And this representation of these areas is called the homunculus. So we have a sensory and a motor homunculus. And whenever someone has damage to the particular region, you can expect then that the person will have a particular deficit or lack of function. So that lack of function will be based on what area do you damage. So here is the primary somatosensory cortex, the homunculus. So if you see here the brain, they make a coronal section like this, and then they present it to you like this. So this will be where we have the longitudinal fissure that separates the right and the left hemispheres. This will be lateral, this will be medial, this will be superior, this will be inferior. So all of this is part of the parietal lobe, and then in here we have the temporal lobe. So each of these little segments represents what areas of the body we're sending sensations. Like here, in this part, we have neurons that tells us if we have certain sensations in the throat. Like, for instance, if you drink cold water, and then you feel that sensation in your throat, that information is going to come here. If you bite your tongue, that information comes in here. Or like if you scald your tongue with something hot. Your teeth, if you have pain in your teeth, so here, chin, lips. If you do this, you feel that in there. So then this homunculus, which is a distorted human body, it tells you how much information we dedicate in the brain to each of these regions. So based on that, what information, what area of the body there is the one that receives more information, sensory information? To this one in here. In the face. What part of the face receives more sensory information or integrates what? Everyone do this.
The tongue?
Yes. Since when this starts in life?
As soon as you breastfeed.
As soon as you're born. Why do you think babies crawl and then start putting things in their mouth? It is reflexive because that's where we have a lot of neurons. So that is that, and then also our lips and our ears. Recently I don't know where, but I heard this. And it happens. Well, I have to do it because I teach, of course, but basically, I mean, yes, we talk a lot, but we're supposed to hear as well. Not only just talk, but also hear. And then I was listening to a talk, and then they say, well, this person is like a hippo. It has a big mouth and very small ears. Basically, the person talks a lot, but doesn't listen as much. Okay, so, and then what about our hands? What part of our hands receives more information? And it's not subdivided there. Well, yeah, it is. And looking here, the other fingers. Yes, we use it a lot. And then out of that, actually, like these two, are the ones that has more. I mean, it's not shown here. Well, it's more or less, but they're supposed to put like the fingers a little bit more smaller the other ones. And then if they represented in here the specific fingers, these two are very important for sensation. And then similarly for the motor area, we have certain motor areas that receive more motor function than others, and that will be kind of already pre-made, I would say, but sometimes within whatever number of neurons we have dedicated, we can actually increase that number of neurons dedicated for a particular function, especially for artists. Like if someone plays the piano, imagine how many neurons they're going to have for their muscles of the arm, forearm, and the fingers. So, I mean, you can develop certain areas. And then, of course, something that you can expect, it is that in some cases, that's the homunculus for the primary motor area. You will have, I don't know, well, I will say it, I mean, if someone loses a limb, let's say the entire arm, right? Well, at least, I guess temporarily, this part that includes the information from like a little bit after this, this part, the longitudinal fissure, up to this middle region, you can expect that you will still have part of these neurons present at the beginning, but as time passes by, the person will lose that information, and perhaps if you start using the other arm, there will be a compensation. And then there is this like phantom limb syndrome, in which whoever loses a limb can still kind of feel sensation as if he was still, as if this person hasn't lost the limb. And there are some theories there of why it happens, but I mean, we have to move on. But again, see, similarly as for the sensory homunculus, we dedicate a lot of neurons to move our throat, the tongue, the lips, and also the face, because, I mean, we are creatures that express our feelings sometimes without words. So that's for the muscles of facial expression. Questions? Okay, so clinical application for the nervous system. So within the spinal cord, we have the CSF that can be withdrawn in some cases when someone, for instance, have an infection. And then you have to make sure that you go into the right space at the right level. So remember that the spinal cord ends between L1 and L2. So when someone introduces a needle, it has to make sure to withdraw cerebrospinal fluid, which is also called a spinal tap. Usually that's supposed to be between L3 and L4, or L4 and L5. And it has to go into the subarachnoid space where we have CSF. If you do it above, you run the risk of damaging the spinal cord, okay? And then you can test also for not only infections, but also for hemorrhages. And then the anatomical landmark in this case will be the 5th lumbar vertebrae, and then you go 1 or 2 vertebrae above, and then you withdraw the CSF. So here we have this lateral view of this longitudinal section. So here we have the first sacral vertebrae, which is S1, and then we have L5 here. And then in this case, this L4, the spinal tap is happening between L4 and L5. And then you just traverse this dura mater and then a little bit of the arachnoid, and then you feel like a pulling because he has like a negative space in the plunger of the syringe, and then you are in the right space. Okay, so what are we going to learn in chapter 13? The structure and function of the PNS, the spinal nerves and reflexes, sensory and motor pathways outside the CNS. Test your knowledge questions. Now is your time to answer. So, which of the following structures is part of the basal nuclei? Hippocampus, cerebellum, caudate nucleus, or thalamus? Caudate nucleus. What is the primary function of the white matter in the CNS? All? There is no option for all. Containing neuron bodies, cell bodies, and it's the white matter in the CNS, producing CSF, processing sensory information, or transmitting electrical signals between the CNS regions.
Transmits.
Yes, it's the transmitting electrical signals. Remember, you have the myelinated axons that transmit these action potentials. So that's a function of the white matter. True or false? The globus pallidus is a component of the basal nuclei involving motor control. Give it another shot. True. There is this damage, guys, to the basal nuclei that it can happen as well from an injury, tumor, a stroke. And then the person will have a walk that looks like this. This is called hemibalismus, like if it was a monkey or a iguana. So it's called hemibalismus. So they don't control really well their muscles. Gray matter is found deep to the white matter in the brain. True or false? False. Yay, very good. I saw a lot of people doing this. That's good. It's false. It is actually superficial. True or false? The limbic system is involved in emotion and memory processing. Remember the novela I told you? The story about the guy who had a crush on me in middle school? No? You were asleep?
It's true.
It's true. And then, what is the role of reticular formation in the brainstem? It goes from the medulla oblongata, pons, midbrain. What does the reticular formation does? There are several neurons that goes in that way.
It's to make connections.
To keep us what? If someone has a whiplash and damages the reticular formation, will the person be conscious? Or will be in coma? So it keeps us awake, a reticular formation. While I prepare the next